What's up YouTube, Russ here, welcome to the Trail Hunter. Are you planning on hiking to Everest Base Camp between the months of September and November? Then this top 10 tips video from my trip is just the video for you. For those of you who are new to my channel, I believe that the best way to explore the world is on foot. I'm offering you hiking video guides, gear reviews, gear lists, travel tips, hiking tips, and much more. So if you're new here, do consider subscribing. Whew. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to explain the top 10 tips that I personally felt are going to be very beneficial to you, my viewers, about the Everest Base Camp trek. This video is going to be specific to trips between the months of September and November because of the different weather patterns, different temperatures, different gear that you're going to need. I started in mid-October and it took me 8 days to get up there and 4 days to get back down. Just before we start, this is all my personal preference and everybody's different, so do hike your own hike, but this is just what I did, what I found, and what I want to share with you guys in this top 10 tips video, so let's get into it. Okay, so tip number 1, do not bring too many clothes. On my trek, I literally bought a base layer, a pair of shorts. The base layer actually was bottom and top layer, and then I bought a synthetic fleece, a down puffy, an extra t-shirt just in case it got a little bit too cold just wearing the base layer, and also I bought a lightweight semi-waterproof breathable shell, which was my Patagonia torrent shell rain jacket. So that was literally just enough, plus a hat and a pair of gloves. So I actually bought 2 pairs of gloves, one really thin kind of cyclist gloves and another thicker pair for keeping the wind off of my hands. Just bring what you think you're gonna need for one day and wear those clothes every single day. Bring 1 spare change of underwear because I just switch those out, and then bring 3 pairs of really thick woolly socks. The reason for this being, if you bring extra layers, you're just not gonna need them. You don't need to change your clothes, expect to get dirty, and bringing less clothes gives you less hassle and it enables you to travel much lighter. So just bring the clothes that you're gonna need and no extra. Tip number 2, which is wear lightweight, breathable footwear. I say this in a lot of my videos. I never wear boots anymore. A pair of shoes with a really good grip on the bottom. You don't need something that encases your entire foot into something that's really tight and it's going to make your feet sweat. That'll just cause blisters. If it rains, your feet are going to get wet anyway in boots. So if you've got a really lightweight shoe, as you're swinging your feet, you're actually going to use a lot less energy. So I always stick to trainers. I actually bought a pair of La Sportiva trainers with me on the trek and they lasted me the whole way. No issues. They were actually very easy to slip on. I wasn't messing around with my laces all the time. I literally tied them twice in the entire trek because they just didn't loosen up on the laces, so I could just slip them on in the morning and that was it for the entire day. So yeah, lightweight breathable footwear, very beneficial. You'll be able to hike much further, much faster with less effort, and you'll use a lot less energy. So I stand by my recommendation. I would only wear the lightweight breathable footwear if you're absolutely comfortable. For you, some boots might be just fine because you need that extra ankle support. But for me, I've practiced without the boots and it's absolutely fine. I tend not to roll my ankle half as much as I used to when I first started practicing with it. So yeah, lightweight breathable footwear. Okay, tip number 3, which is don't bring too many snacks and too much food with you. You're just not gonna need all of those candy bars, all of those nuts and snacks and things like that. Every day you're gonna pass through tea houses along the way for lunchtime. You're gonna pass through little towns and little villages. You're not gonna eat all of those snacks in one day. And if you're willing to spend about £1,000 on an excursion for 2 weeks, such as the Everest Base Camp trek, I would say that you're going to be more than happy spending a few extra pounds when you're at the tea houses buying your snacks just for the day. I think on the entire trek I only ate about 4 Snickers bars. I bought an entire pack of nuts that I just didn't eat because there's so much food along the way in these tea houses, and you're going to eat enough at lunchtime, at breakfast and at dinner. So just bring snacks for the day. If you run out, buy them at the tea houses. There's plenty there on offer. I saw so much from like M&Ms and Snickers bars, crisps, You can buy water at every single one of these tea houses, so the food is in absolute abundance. Yes, it gets a little bit more expensive as you go up the trail towards Everest Base Camp. Ending up in Gorakshep, you're going to spend a bit more money, but just save the weight. You're going to have a much more enjoyable experience with less weight in your pack, less things to worry about packing. I literally, to be honest, if I was to do the whole thing again, I would just bring like the bare minimum amount of food with me just for that day. So yeah, bring as little food as you possibly can. This brings me on to tip number 4, which is take it slow. So listen to your body as you're going up the mountains and as you're going up the trail further and further in elevation. You're going to feel the effects of altitude sickness, and your body's not going to be able to cope with the amount of strain that you're putting on it. Your stamina is going to drop very, very quickly. Before you know it, you're literally only able to walk about 2 or 3 minutes before having to stop and take a break. Don't push your body too hard, and if you start getting tired, just take a break. You've got all the time in the world. I see people literally just pushing themselves so hard, sweating, unable to breathe properly, and then about a day later I'll see them really struggling up in places like Dingboche and Loboche, where they've just pushed themselves far too hard. But by all means, if you feel well and you're up for doing it and the altitude isn't affecting you too much, then by all means go ahead and go a bit faster. There were days actually when I was up at Everest Base Camp where I was able to literally go so fast. I was just off on one. I was really enjoying actually walking quite fast, but as soon as I felt my body starting to get tired, I just took it really slow. I think my pace was less than half a mile an hour. It was really slow going. So enjoy the trek. Take your time, take it slow, and make sure that you listen to your body, because you'll actually end up being more sure that you're going to finish the trek that way. Okay, so tip number 5, which is let your guide, if you've gone with a guide, advise you on when to take your Diamox altitude sickness tablets. What a lot of people do is they start taking the tablets willy-nilly way too soon in the trek, or even just before they've started the trek, and they end up 1, wasting their tablets, 2, using it when they don't need to, and possibly making themselves sick just from using them when they don't need to. So let your guide keep a close eye on you, look at your fitness, look at your health, the colour in your face. I'm not a doctor, but the guide knows when you should be taking these tablets. He or she will actually be able to advise you on when to take them instead. So if your guide feels that you're doing absolutely fine, you don't need the tablets, just trust their judgment and go with what they say. I actually ended up only taking 1 Diamox tablet on the entire trip, and maybe it was a little bit too late, but the weather, the cold, the lack of sleep just before we went up to Patthar, there was no real kind of knowing whether I should have taken a Diamox tablet or not, but maybe just keep in check with your guide and ask him if he recommends that you take one. And when he or she says take their advice, you'll be a lot better off for that. Okay, so tip number 6, which is make sure that the trekking company and the guide that you're with pre-book your accommodation before you head out on the trek. The reason that I say this is because before I started my trek, I thought that everything was pre-booked and ready to go, so at every single town and village we would have somewhere to stay, but that wasn't the case, unfortunately. We got to Namche Bazaar and we were actually searching for 2 whole hours looking for somewhere suitable to stay, and we were so lucky we got somewhere right at the last minute, just before a big group of people came in, and this probably happened 2 or 3 times on the entire trek. It wasn't so much of an issue, there were spaces available, but the last thing you want when you've had a really hard day's trekking is to be going up and down the hills in all of these towns and villages looking for somewhere to stay, and in your mind it's kind of a bit stressful because you're not entirely sure if you're even going to get somewhere. The likelihood of it is that you will, but if for some reason it's just absolutely rammed that day, you may not get somewhere to stay. So make sure just before you finish all your booking when you're at the place in Kathmandu where your trekking company is, that you pre-book all of the places that you're going to stay just before you go. Okay, so tip number 7, which is keep an eye on the weather forecast, especially the temperatures. So if you're going between the months of September and November, you can be pretty damn sure it's going to be dry, it's going to be sunny, there might be some cloud in the afternoons, so maybe looking at whether it's going to rain or not isn't the best thing, but keeping an eye on that temperature is absolutely crucial, because when we were at Gorakshep we were expecting kind of like a moderate temperature, as it has been throughout most of the trek at those altitudes. And the night before we got a very kind of brief weather forecast in saying that instead of being about -2, it was going to drop all the way down to about -20 in the night, making it very difficult to feel your fingers and your toes going up to Kala Patthar on that day. So you're going to be getting up at about 4:30 in the morning to start your trek to Kala Patthar. It was absolutely freezing when we got outside. There was frost on the yaks. There was frozen icicles on all of the buildings. It was so cold. I haven't experienced cold like that before in my life. I was actually well prepared, but my guide Kalyan actually wasn't prepared for that really sudden dip in temperature. So when he got up to Kala Patthar, he was absolutely freezing. I mean, really strong guy and a brilliant guide. But if even the guide wasn't expecting that kind of temperature drop, then I think it's very important that you just keep an eye on the weather and ask some people if they know what the weather's going to be like the next day before you go to bed, so you can judge whether you need some really dry socks for the morning if you're washing your socks and drying them on the wood burners. So yeah, I think that's probably one of my most important bits of advice in this video, because that sudden drop in temperature was just unreal. So yeah, very good bit of advice there. So that brings me swiftly on to my next tip, which is tip number 8, and that is save a pair of super dry, unworn, really clean socks for your trek to Kala Patthar, because I saw a lot of people washing their socks at Gorakshep and then trying to dry all of their socks huddled around the wood burner. And a lot of people, I should imagine, were left with really wet socks in the morning because they don't leave the wood burner on all night. Sometimes you might get there a little bit late, or there might not be enough room to dry your socks. So just make sure for base camp and Kala Patthar that you save a really clean, dry pair of socks. Because in the morning, if that temperature drops to -20 like it did for me, what I was wearing in the morning for my trek to Kala Patthar when the temperature dropped to -20 was a pair of socks that I've been wearing for about 4 days. They hadn't been washed, they're a little bit sweaty, and the tips of the toe area on the sock actually froze in my shoe, and I was left with super numb toes, especially my right foot big toe got so cold it went numb for about 2.5 hours. I thought I was going to get frostbite on it. I literally couldn't feel my toes, and you could actually feel the sock in the front actually freezing on your foot. So very important, just save a pair of super clean dry socks for that day. Okay, so moving on to tip number 9, which is go on your own with a guide and not in a huge group. For me, I like the solitude and being able to go at my own pace on any trek. So when I did the South Downs Way, I did that completely alone. That was 100 miles. And I'm going to be doing the PCT next year, and I'm doing that completely alone without a guide. Obviously for the Everest Base Camp trek, you're hiking to altitudes of over 5,000 meters, so you don't know how your body's going to react. So I would recommend kind of going with a guide just for that fact, and unless you've done this kind of trek on your own before. For me, going in a big group just isn't ideal. I feel like if you're in a group of about 15 or 20 people, I saw huge lines of people going all the way up the mountain, like 20, 30 people, and they're all going really slow. And if somebody got sick on the trail, every single person on that trek would have to stop. A lot of the times, a lot of people were going a lot faster than the rest of the group, so they'd get split off. I saw people arguing, I saw people getting carried down by 2 people either side, and the whole excursion would have to come to a grinding halt. Whereas if you're on your own with a guide, like I said before, you can go at your own pace, you can go and stay wherever you want to stay. If there's a complication, it's much easier to sort out. I would say go with one other friend or maybe 2 other people, not in a huge group of 20 or 30 people. It's just ridiculous. And in some places the trail actually gets so thin that you have to go in single file, and a lot of people have to wait. I just think, for me personally, it's a much more enjoyable experience. The less people, you don't have to rely on anyone for any opinions, and you don't have to try and please other people, and other people don't have to try and please you. Also, you get to enjoy the nature and the views and take your time. It's just, for me, a much more enjoyable experience. So yeah, I advise that it's much better to go on your own with a guide or with 1 or 2 other friends tops. Okay, my 10th and final tip, which is eat a lot and eat regularly, even if your appetite isn't all that up to scratch. The altitude is going to make your appetite a lot shorter. You're not going to want to eat so much, especially at breakfast, but it's very, very important that you keep those calories up. The food at the tea houses can be a bit questionable, but just go with it. Stay vegetarian. Take the snacks with you like I recommended earlier, just for that day, so that you have enough each day. And yeah, just eat as much as you can, because on the day before we hiked up to Patthar at Gorakshep, I only ate some soup for dinner, and then in the morning I didn't have any breakfast. There just wasn't any time. I think if I had actually eaten a lot more the day before and in the morning, then I would have made it all the way to Patthar, hands down. I just ran out of energy. The altitude really got to me. I think if you've got like a full stomach and you've got lots of energy in you and you've got lots of body heat being generated, eating a lot is very, very important for getting all of that inside your body. So definitely try to eat as much as you can, even if your appetite is quite low. Okay guys, this is the end of the video. If you liked it, then hit that thumbs up. Also, let me know in the comments below if you've done the Everest Base Camp trek before, if you've got any top tips that you'd like to share with the trail hunter community. Do feel free to write those in the comments section. Also, I upload videos very regularly, about 3 or 4 times a week at the moment. I do a lot of videos like this at the moment where I'm giving tips and advice about all the treks and things that I've done. So yeah, do consider subscribing for those videos. I hope you will enjoy them. Okay folks, thanks very much for watching The Trail Hunter, and I'll see you guys in the next one.